it can't be easy growing up as the son of an NBA coach, but there's a lot of things that come with that, a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge. And today's guest is going to share a lot of the things that he's learned throughout his career. And you get to see that not only as the son of a coach, but as a player and now a head coach himself. He's going to share a lot of his experience. I mean, I watched this guy play at Boise State throughout his career. I've followed his professional career as a player, not only in the NBA, but overseas. And now he is the head coach of the South Bay Lakers. It's going to be an amazing conversation. You don't want to miss this episode of the Game Time Guru. So,
what time is it? Game time!
This is the Game Time Guru podcast, where I interview sports figures from all over the world to help deliver a panoramic view on sports. So whether you're a former athlete, one of the crazies, or simply a casual sports fan, this is the perfect show for you as we peel back the curtains and learn from our guests every single week. I'm your host, Shane Larson, and I'm helping you see sports through a different lens. What's going on, everyone? Welcome out to another episode of the Game Time Guru podcast. My name is Shane Larson, host of the show. I want to give a special shout out to all of the listeners over the past 4 years. I mean, we've reached 90 different countries, 64,000 downloads. We appreciate the growth of the show, and it's all due to the listeners out there, the people who've supported the show, whether it's from day one or if this is your first time listening to the show because you saw the big name. Cool. Welcome aboard. We're excited to have you on here as listeners. Make sure to go give me a follow on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or even YouTube. You guys can come and follow me over there. I love engaging with the fans. I love engaging with listeners, any sports fan, anyone who wants to discuss sports at any capacity. Come over there. That's where we have a little bit of a way to get away from the real world and chat about sports and about the show. Introducing our guest on the show today. I mean, guys, super excited to bring this man on. Current coach of the South Bay Lakers, affiliate of the Los Angeles Lakers. He's had a professional career. We'll talk about that, playing professionally, not only in the NBA, but also overseas. So we get a little bit of information about that. He's the host of the Curious Leader podcast. You don't want to miss that. Make sure to go follow that. We'll talk about that as well. And he's a Boise State guy. So for anybody in the Treasure Valley who's listening, you're going to know the name. His name's Coby Karl. Coby, thanks so much for joining the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to get back to the roots of Boise. We've been here for about a year now and really enjoyed getting back into the community.
That's awesome, man. So talking about that a little bit, right? When I was in high school was when you came over to Boise State, and the name, obviously everybody knew who George Karl was, right? Everybody in the sports world knew who George Karl was. But we heard about his son was coming to Boise, and we're like, why did you choose Boise State? We were excited about it. We were wondering what the reason was that you chose Boise State. So could you give us a little bit of a background on why you chose to play your college career at Boise State University?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my stories, I mean, all of our stories are unique, but my story is pretty unique. I was a late bloomer. So, I was out in Wisconsin playing high school ball when my dad was with the Bucks. And I was on a very average high school team. I was one of the better players or, one of the best players on my team, but, we weren't in a big time league or anything like that. So I wasn't highly recruited. I didn't have any D1 scholarship offers from anywhere. And then, so I went and visited a couple of different universities and for walk-on opportunities with the prospect of getting a scholarship the second year. And my family's from this area. So my mom's side of the family's from Idaho. And so my grandpa, they grew up in Ontario and Nampa area. And he still is alive, 93 or 94 right now. And my mom lives in Nampa right now. All my, a bunch of my cousins, aunts and uncles are out here. So I was familiar with the area. Every time my dad would get fired, in between jobs, we'd relocate to Boise for whatever, 6 months or a year. We lived in McCall a little bit. So, and then McCall's always been like our family's, like, I guess what's the word? Like safe place. We would always go there in the summer. We had a rental up there. So when I came and visited, Coach Graham had just got the job and really didn't have any recruits, and they were transferring from being a really defensive minded team. I don't know if you guys remember, but it was Joe Skiffer, Brian DeFerris, Jason Ellis, great defensive players. And they didn't really, they didn't play offense. They just played defense. And so it was kind of fun for me to have that the chance to be that, one of coach's first guys. And it just seemed like a good opportunity, a great conference where we were going to be able to go to Hawaii, Louisiana Tech. And so it's just a good combination, really high level basketball, I thought, for the teams that I was looking at. And then I was familiar with the city, new exciting time for the university with Coach Graham coming in, and it all kind of matched up for me.
That's awesome. Shout out to Nampa. That's where I'm actually currently living. That's from we just built our new house. So shout out Nampa. We don't get to hear much about Nampa. So when you reference that, I was like, okay, let's get a little love for Nampa out here. And then McCall, for those who don't know, who are listening outside of the state of Idaho, McCall's kind of up in the mountains, about 2 hours away from Boise. And it's a phenomenal city. People go there you can go there in the winter because it's fantastic. It's gorgeous. And you can go there in the summer because the lake's fantastic. It's a beautiful place. So what Coby's mentioned in there, that's their safe place. There's a good reason for that because it is out in the mountains and it's just gorgeous, small little town, but really, really pretty. I do have a question for you then, Coby. You said you were a late bloomer. That's interesting because I obviously am nowhere near your skill level, but I was too a late bloomer and I graduated early. That was the problem. Is I was one of those kids that graduated when I was 17. That's just naturally how I was. I was always, I just started school when I was young. When I was in kindergarten, I was 5 years old. So when I got to my senior year in high school, I was 17 years old. I was just used to that. But I realize now, coaching 16-year-olds for club ball and just being around the game a lot more, those guys who bloom late, sometimes, it takes you 18, 19 years old to really hit your stride because your body matures and whatnot. But I am curious, you said, you were a late bloomer, you're playing at your high school. Was there a lot of pressure on your shoulders being the son of a head coach in the NBA, a very well-known and well-respected head coach in the NBA, and having, that coach feel, and then saying, well, he's not to the skill set. Like his dad's an NBA coach. Well, why isn't he an NBA caliber right now? Like, did you ever have that pressure growing up?
Yeah, the way you're kind of presenting it, I guess I never felt that way, but I definitely had the pressure of knowing, my dad would come to games and people would know who he was, and then eventually they find out who I was. And I really wasn't the best player on my team very often, especially at like the AAU level. I played with Dan Grunfeld, who ended up going to Stanford, and he was a really high level recruit. A couple of these guys that were really good players. So I definitely felt that the scrutiny of eyes being on me. But the cool thing was growing up around the NBA excuse me, growing up around the NBA was I had the opportunity to be around really high level players and then really high level coaches. So I was in that environment of I could see these guys work, and I actually just reached out to Michael Redd the other day on Instagram. I just got on social media. So but Michael Redd and Jason Hart were like two of the guys that really made an impression on me, because when I was in Milwaukee with my dad during the Bucks time, Michael Redd got drafted by the Bucks in the second round, and he was going to be a first round pick that first year, and then got drafted to the Bucks in the second round and was playing behind Ray Allen and some other elite guard, and ended up not playing the whole season as this guy who ends up going on to be a NBA multi-million-dollar contract guy, ends up winning a gold medal with the USA team. But he didn't play the whole year, and then I would go before the game and try to get some shots up and whatever, help out with the assistant coaches. And Michael Redd and Jason Hart would be working their ass off for like an hour and a half before the game and grinding. And by the end of the season, he started getting a little time because he was putting in that work and starting to kind of find his professional legs and kind of get his feel. And then, like I said, he ends up being an Olympian and goes on to be a franchise player for multiple years in Milwaukee. So that type of thing really made an impact on my life, where while I didn't have the skills or necessarily the body yet, I knew how to work, and I saw these guys put in the time, and it didn't necessarily matter that I wasn't the best player on my team at that point. I knew if I just kept working that I could figure out ways to get on the court. I could figure out ways to win. And I think that's the benefit for like a young player, is just go out and play. You got to play so much. I learned so much. Granted, I'm talking about Michael Redd and Jason Hart and these NBA players, but I learned so much from Brian DeFerris and Joe Skiffer and Jason Ellis and Booker Neighbors, these guys who were seniors when I was freshman, because I was getting my ass kicked by them. So yeah, it's every part of the journey is so important.
Guys, allow me to take a second and tell you about Sportsepreneur. Now, as an entrepreneur myself and a massive sports fan, this is the perfect platform for someone like myself and a lot of you guys out there. It's a content platform where sports and entrepreneurship collide. Collaboration and content marketing for the entrepreneur with a sports passion, just like me and you. I connected with their founder a couple years back, and I'll tell you guys, we have a massive connection through sports and entrepreneurship, and he's just an amazing guy, and their team is absolutely incredible. The team at Sportsy creates content for you and with you. Their content, which lives at sportsy.io, includes stories like the missteps of the NCAA, an in-depth article on esports, and how to bring people together, which is also one of my favorite things because I always tell you guys sports bring people together. Now, Sportsy also features amazing guests on their podcast, including Thad Matta, AJ Vaynerchuk, and Colin Jones. So be sure to subscribe to their podcast on Apple or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And here's the thing. The team at Sportsy thinks that every entrepreneur that is willing should have their own content platform, and they want to help make that happen. So if you're an entrepreneur that's looking to start a podcast or build a website, write blog posts, or design social media posts, then you have to reach out to the team at Sportsy. They make content creation accessible. Sportsepreneur, the content platform where sports and entrepreneurship collide. Learn more at sportsy.io or connect with the founder on Twitter at Eric_Kaz. That's ERIC_KAZ. Man, that's so cool. And hearing those names like Michael Redd, I mean, I'm a Buckeyes fan, so just I knew him. I grew up watching him. So like I obviously knew who I followed his story, but not knowing that's really cool for me to hear because you were there behind the scenes seeing what the work that was being put in. A lot of Buckeyes fans, even me at a younger age, was wondering like, oh, I didn't understand like why he wasn't getting playing time. Obviously, I understand it now, like the structure of how the NBA works and where you're at in the depth chart, but the work that goes on behind the scenes, he wasn't done working. He was a phenomenal college athlete. But the work doesn't stop. You got to keep putting the work in. And it's cool that you were able to see that and then implement that into your own life. And then your name dropping, BD and Book. I mean, I still play with those guys to this day. They're competitors and it's cool. And like Jason Ellis and Skip, like it's cool to hear those names that you're dropping because they have a well-known names in the Valley. They're well respected. So super, super cool. Coby, so you go into Boise State. I remember, that was during my high school days. And so like I followed you guys religiously. I mean, I love that team. I love the teams every year. Like the program was just awesome at that time. I'm curious, do you have a favorite memory of that particular span? Because you guys made it to I believe it was the NIT. If I'm not mistaken, that's when you guys had to play at the Idaho Center against Green Bay, Wisconsin, or I think that might've been it. That was a really cool game to be at. I can't remember who you guys played the first game and beat.
UNLV.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what it was. And then everyone's like, oh, shoot, they got to play again. Well, we have a conflict in schedule. And then they had to go to the Idaho Center, which I went to and watched. And it ended up, you guys should have blown them out, but then they ended up coming back and making it close. And it was just a really fun thing. But I'm curious, what was your favorite memory, or do you have a couple that you could share at your Boise State days?
Yeah, no, it was ironic you brought that up because that was the first memory that came to mind was that game at the Idaho Center versus UWM, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I was just a freshman playing with all those seniors. I just redshirted the previous year and made my way into the lineup, ended up starting at the end of the season. And that was a really good team. Bruce Pearl was the head coach of that team.
Yeah.
And I grew up, their best player was a couple years older than me in my high school conference. So like I knew some of their players and they were like, I looked up to those guys, some of those guys on that team. And at the end of the game, it was a close game and I wanted the ball. Like I remember we got the ball in and I got fouled and I was like, I was excited to be that guy to shoot the free throws, which, now I know as a coach, that's a valuable thing, right? Is to have someone who wants to be at the line. And luckily I made them. I made the free throws and we ended up winning the game. And then we ended up eventually losing to Marquette at Marquette. But, yeah, that was one of my favorite memories just because that team, like I said, that team impacted me so much because wow, BD and Joe Skiff and Jason, they didn't have that skill level. They had this intense competitive nature and this physical nature, like defensively, you weren't going to beat them physically or mentally. You had to beat them with skill. And so just being part of that group was an honor for me to learn so much from those guys. And that year was a lot of fun for us. We ended up, having the most success of my 4 years playing.
That's so cool. It's cool, like to think back as a fan, even just like remembering the game, the little things that happened. And I may be mistaken, but I thought in the first NIT game when you guys were at home, I
Yeah.
swear you had a dunk that was a monster dunk, but I could be wrong. But I swear you like threw it
No, I
down
did.
two handed.
Yeah, I got one, and I didn't have many dunks in transition because I was a 2 foot. I'm a 2 foot jumper. But yeah, I remember I got a dunk. It was we came out, we killed them. Like they were a really
Yeah.
good team. They were kind of in disarray, and we came out and played really really well. We were playing fast, getting easy buckets, and I ended up getting a dunk in transition. Um, uh, but yeah, it was. I remember Lou Almanson was a freshman on that team, and he ended up playing, having like a 10-year career in the NBA. And but they had a couple of good players, but now we're just being old, remembering all these old players.
No, it's cool though. Like I like to geek out on that stuff. That's cool. So I do remember that then, and you having a dunk and whatnot. I just like to follow the teams around here. I'm from the Valley, so like I remember those days, and it was good high school days for me too, just to be able to go to the games with my friends and my family. So,
Yeah.
as you go into your professional career, Coby, you weren't new to you're not new to the NBA. Obviously, your dad, you've been around the circuit. You were just talking about it, right? Like the experiences being around the NBA, you're not new to it. But as a player, talk about that a little bit. Going from having, you got a lot of minutes playing in college because of the player that you were, then you're going into the NBA where it's a whole nother ball game. And talk to us about that transition for any of those athletes that are out there that are thinking that they've got it all because they're playing crazy minutes in high school and they want to go to the collegiate level. Well, all of a sudden, everyone's at that level now. So you've got to figure out a way to get there. Talk to us about your transition into the NBA and what the experience was like for you as a player at this point now, not just a son of a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. It was different, because as a ball boy when I was really young, and then being around my dad's teams as an aspiring athlete, even working out with my dad's team when I was at Boise State, I'd go train with the Nuggets guys in the summer, and so I was very familiar with those guys, playing with a bunch of NBA guys, but being on the team, being paid with responsibilities, with the chance of getting cut, whole different ball game for me. But as you were saying that, you talk about these elite high school players who are really good at their level and then have to make the next step. Like that next step is what really knocks people off. They lose faith in themselves. They don't necessarily have the answers. And I think that's where I had the benefit of what we talked about is I knew the grind, like, and I was familiar with that. And the story that came to mind when you said that was actually my freshman year at Boise State. I remember, all those guys I talked about. There's a couple older guys that would came back and played open gym with us too. And I was in open gym as a freshman, and I was at the gym for probably an hour and a half, and I got to play 2 games because we kept getting our ass kicked, and I hadn't earned any respect. I physically wasn't there, couldn't get a win, and they're just kicking our ass. And I remember I was going to eat lunch, and I was crying because I just wasn't good enough to play at that level yet. And I think those are the things that really I look back and I say, man, I'm so thankful that I had that wisdom to work, and that I could, I had, even though I'm getting my ass kicked, I can put in the time and keep getting better. And I knew that, when those individual sessions, or the times when you go to the gym, or weightlifting, or whatever it is, your sprint work, or your cardiovascular work, whatever it is, I knew that if I put in more effort there, that would transfer over. And I think that's what I see a lot of athletes, even, for us in the G League, we're basically a transition for these elite college players to become NBA players. And our job as a staff a lot of the time is just keeping them going forward and not letting them, get deterred by the physicality of a grown man. Like Jason Ellis was one of my favorite teammates. And Jason, he's 6'6", but a rock of a
Oh
muscle.
yeah.
And when I played with him in the G League, he would play against like Hilton Armstrong, who's 7 foot, went to UConn, was a lottery pick, and Hilton couldn't score on him because Jason knew the angles, was strong enough, knew how to do his work early. So all these things like will deter a young player. But like that's why I bring up the story of that is when I went to the NBA, I was undrafted, and then the Lakers invited me to the summer league, and so I kind of went back to my freshman year. It's like, okay, I got to prove myself. I got to put the work in. I'm going to learn the system. I'm going to, ask a bunch of questions. be a great teammate. All these things that we say as coaches, but I had the benefit of that because that was what I grew up around with my father, and that benefited me well until it didn't, right? And then I ended up getting cut, but as a 15th guy or 13th guy on the roster, I would just do the work, just keep doing the work. We just had Jeannie Buss on my podcast, and that's what she kept talking about, is just do the work, and what I mean by that is, rather than me not playing, as you said, is I'm going to stay in shape. If I'm not playing, that means I can get in the weight room more. That means I can get on the floor and do more skill development work. I can go, play 1-on-1, 2-on-2 against other guys who aren't playing. So there's always work to be done. You just have to know and figure out what that work is for you.
That is huge. Just doing the work. 'Cause I was going to ask you, like what advice you would give to these guys. I mean, obviously you're at the NBA level. That's a different level. But for even the young guys here in high school that are trying to play, and they might find themselves as an 8th or 9th man on the bench, they're not getting the minutes they want. Maybe 5 to 10 minutes a game, if that. Currently, I guess you pretty much just answered it, is do the work. Is there any other advice as a coach and as somebody who's been through it yourself that you would give to them outside of just doing the work, or is that kind of like the solidified answer?
I mean, there's like within that answer that the work is different for every person.
Right.
Like I think the hardest thing to do as a human being for me is to look at myself and really know who I am and figure out, what am I capable of, and without putting a ceiling on what I'm capable of, but also not being unrealistic. So I say that if you're a 5'10" or a 5'8" point guard, getting in the weight room and getting beefed up isn't going to necessarily be the work for you. You got to be strong enough to play at that level, but maybe it's just playing against better competition and not turning the ball over, or maybe it's picking up full court every time you play open gym, and it doesn't matter if your friends get pissed at you. It's just different. You got to find out where you fit in. And as we talk about this, all I can really think about is team. It's a team sport. So within our country, I believe our skill development is getting better and better, but where you're seeing other countries excel past us with the skill, with the game of basketball, is these players are playing with pros at a really young age. Doncic is a great example right now. He's been playing in Spain since he was 13 years old against pros, against guys that were 30 years old that were just in the NBA. And so I bring that up, and just to say that as you are playing in the team and you're looking for more opportunity from your coach or whatnot, realize that it's a team game. So it's not necessarily your coach, but what holes can you fill? Can you be the best help side defender on the team? Can you be the best communicator? Because those things make everyone on the floor better. That was, I had the benefit of growing up in that world and knowing those things, and that was kind of what got me to help getting to the next level, because those things are the same at every level. If you're a great teammate in 7th grade, and you're a great teammate in high school, and you're a great teammate in college, and a great teammate in pros, like I just talked to Jared Dudley today, he's like the best teammate in the NBA, and he was undrafted like I was undrafted the same year. But like, I knew he was going to be successful because he just knew how to fit in. It's like everyone wants to be the star guy and get the attention, but not too many people put their attention on, what can help my team right now. If you're the best scorer on my team, we don't need another scorer. We need someone who's going to get me open, or, make it easier on me, or say, hey, like, let me pick up the ball this time so you can get your legs under you. Being selfless is such a skill that I think is being underdeveloped in our game right now.
That is so huge, and the name drop in there too. And I didn't know Dudley was undrafted with you the same year. See, this is good stuff. And I hope the listeners, whether you're a parent or an athlete, or just a fan alike, but specifically parents and athletes, like, listen and take notes to what Coby's saying, because what's going on. You mentioned the overseas game, and before we get there, I did want to ask you one last question about being part of the Lakers organization prior to now, where you're obviously in that organization as a coach for the South Bay Lakers. But as a player, who was the best player you played with and against during that time?
My time with the Lakers.
Yes, sir.
Oh, Kobe Bryant.
Okay, so that's the easy answer. But can you tell people why? So yeah, so for everybody understanding, he was there during the Kobe era. Why was Kobe though? Like, give us a specific for anybody who hasn't listened to Tim Grover's book or read Tim Grover's book, Relentless or whatever. Tell us why, as somebody who was there and watched him, why was Kobe Bryant the best player you played with?
At that level, what I've learned now, at my age is that there's certain people that just have this insatiable need to win, and it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't matter if they win once, it doesn't matter if they win twice. It is like they can't stop themselves, and that's what Kobe had. Is he did not care who the fuck you were. He didn't care, you know, how many times that they just beat you. They don't care if you're undrafted. They don't care if you're the number one pick. He wants to beat whoever's in front of him, and it goes for his daughter and whoever his family. It's just like the competitive nature. Now, what made Kobe special is that he understood the work too, and so he had this drive to be the best, but he also recognized. I mean, if you watch the Muse and some of the stuff that he left us with before he passed, is he realized within his failures that there was room for him to grow. So like when we reach our failures and we're crying on the way to the sub after open gym, like I was, is if you can locate, if you can access the area that you failed at or that you weren't good enough at, and then go put that time in, go put the effort in, go ask the questions. Like, I think that's what made Kobe so special. Is he was smart. He knew where his failures came from. He was willing to admit those failures, at least to himself, not to other people. And then he would go put the work in. And then he had the drive. But the work is always going to be there. If whoever we talk about as a successful person, it's going to be the work. Like, you can have talent as long as when you get to the next level, that talent is similar or isn't as good, and then you got to put the work in.
100%, man. That's super powerful too, just to hear that. See, this is the stuff I like, and interviewing people like yourself who are willing to elaborate a little bit more. That's where our listeners learn. That's where I learn. That's where our listeners learn from. Because, yeah, we all know Kobe was good. Like, everybody understand. But if you were there at a personal level and you can see that, and then articulate that, that's the best piece about this. So that's a golden nugget. I appreciate that.
Well, as you say that, sorry to interrupt, but as you say that, like, I was talking to someone, Kobe, and I heard this. I never actually saw it in person, which I believe it though, because this is his mind was very beginner oriented, and what I mean by that is he didn't feel like he knew anything until he like felt it inside himself. So like he would go into the gym, from the story that I heard, and to start his individual workouts, he would do 10 minutes with no basketball, just footwork. Like, these are the things that you see uber talented high school, college kids that can create their own shot, but they don't have the footwork. It's a natural instinct from survival, from wherever you grew up. New York kids with the handle, or the Chicago, Seattle, Jamal Crawford, all these guys. But like, Kobe would put in the time to really master things at a level that I don't think most would. And what you see with that next level of guy is they know that mastery comes from just repetition, doing the work. And to be able to go into a gym and not touch a basketball while you're on the basketball court, and just work through your footwork, pinch post footwork, post up, mid post, wing footwork, the defensive footwork. I mean, it's, when you really think about it, it makes a lot of sense. But who has the patience and the courage to do something so different?
Totally, man. That's so cool. And I can totally believe that too. I always talked about Kobe's footwork. Like, I was always like, dude, that's one of the things that made him elite, because his footwork was unbelievable. He'd get himself in the right position to give himself an advantage. And his footwork was so like, people don't focus on that. And that is, So when you're talking about that, I'm like, oh my gosh, it totally makes sense. That's awesome, man. In the NBA, first off, like, because I want to talk about your professional career overseas too, because I'm actually really, really interested in that. It's a focus I've put on my show before, is talking about the global impact of basketball, there are some really talented athletes across the globe. Just because they're not in the NBA, people say, oh, well, they're not in the NBA, so they're not good hoopers. That is, I believe that's completely false. I think there's some amazing basketball players all over the world. I mean, the NBA is just limited on who can be in there, and sometimes it's a business game. But before we get there, when you were, in the NBA, during your stints with different teams, just playing against somebody, obviously Coby was the guy you played with, but against somebody, who was the best athlete that you came across? Just seeing him on the floor being like, dang, like I've watched this guy for a while, but he is the real deal.
Best athlete, I guess I'll say the best player. I mean, they were on the floor at the same time, and they're still elite in the NBA today. Was when I got a 10-day with the Warriors, and we played Oklahoma City when they had the big three. So the best athlete was Russell Westbrook. Just seeing his explosiveness, quick twitch, and everything he does, the aggression he plays with. And then the best player was Kevin Durant. I mean, Don Nelson was the coach of the time, and he put me in at the small forward position to guard Kevin Durant. And I was a physical defender. I have long arms, and it was like I wasn't even there. And he just he's just so tall, so long, so skilled. Plays with a fluidity that you can't really load up on him and be over physical with him, because he's just a really natural athlete and has a high skill level. So those are the two guys for sure. I remember that game. It was my first game on the 10-day, and we were mid-season. It was Steph's rookie year, and we were getting our ass kicked as a team. And he put me in the second quarter to start the second quarter. I got 4 fouls on Kevin Durant in like the first 6 minutes of playing against him. And then Don Nelson leaves me in the game in the second quarter with 4 fouls. Which it's a great, I love like when coaches do it differently. And so I definitely learned a lesson from when he did that. When he left me in, I was like, all right, cool. I'll just play through it. I'm not going to complain.
Oh, good old Don Nelson. That's crazy though. And those guys, like you just said, they're still hooping today. They're still elite ballers. I think Westbrook they just mentioned he's like the Wizards all-time leader in triple doubles, and he's only been there for a handful of games for the season. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's craziness how good he still is. And obviously KD, the elite player that he is. That's cool, man. Coby, going over to your professional career overseas, a lot of guys have a pride issue. I've talked to a lot of guys that they struggle with pride because I'm going overseas and it's because I couldn't make it. They have this that's a mind game. I'm curious what your thoughts were when you went overseas. Were you excited? Was it a fresh start? Was it just what was the mindset for you in your particular situation? And what was the experience for the years that you played over there for different organizations? I mean, I know every organization's different. I've heard horror stories of people playing overseas because the contracts are never like finalized and this or that, or housing situations are weird, but some organizations are different. So I'm curious to hear your experience playing overseas.
Yeah, it changed as my career went on.
Okay.
Early in my career, I played with the Lakers for my rookie year, got cut the day before the season. My second year, played with the Stampede and was having a really good season my second season. And my agent convinced me to go play in Europe and go play in Spain. And my mindset at that time was, I want to play in the NBA. Like, I want to be an NBA player. I want to prove that I'm an NBA player. And I felt like I was really, really close. But then my agent just convinced me that this was the best opportunity. Ricky Rubio was on our team. They're going to play in the Copa del Rey, which is like the biggest tournament, one of the biggest tournaments in Europe. It's the top 8 teams from the Spanish league. And, a ton of NBA scouts are going to be there, yada, yada, yada. He went down the list. So I wanted to be in the NBA though. So that first one for me was a little struggle, because my expectation was, all right, I'm going to go here, kill it, and then try to get back into the NBA. Like, this is going to be my route to the NBA. But that's not how life works. I didn't kill it because the players over there are so good. It's a very different game. It's a more physical game, less fluidity, less space. No defense at 3 seconds. So we can go down the list there. But just bottom line was, I wasn't good enough at that point. And I came to a really good team and just didn't play a lot, wasn't good enough, and kind of was humbled. And then as my career went on, I would go back and really enjoyed the experiences. I remember I got cut. I came back, played for Cleveland for a half season, got cut, went to Stampede, and then got that 10-day with the Golden State Warriors. And then after that season, I'd played on Cavs, Stampede, Warriors, Stampede, and then got called up to the Nuggets at the end of the season. Never played a game. So I played for 4 teams, 5 teams if you include the Stampede twice. Um, and after that season, I said I just want to be on a team. I just want to play
Right.
basketball. So that was when I went back to Spain on a lower level team, and I was just excited to be there. I just wanted to play. I wanted to prove myself. Um, and then over the years, I ended up getting to Italy and Germany in different situations. But my wife was always with me and my girlfriend at the time, and we just learned so much from the culture. You learn so much from the European countries, how different they are, like the Italians compared to the Spanish, compared to the Germans. Like I have a coaching friend who's in Lithuania right now, and he coached in Germany last year, and he's like blown away by how well Germany ran stuff compared to how Lithuania is. So I mean the stories go on, but you're absolutely right when you talk about it's just different. The contract doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get your money on time, depending on what country. If it's Germany, you'll get it on time. If it's, I've heard bad things from Turkey. I've heard, I don't want to solely countries' names, but it's really dependent on. It's like anything. It's if you go to a really bad business, it's just you're not going to get the same thing as you would from a really high level business that cares about their product. And in Europe, unfortunately, because basketball is like usually the second tier sport compared to football or soccer, there's not as much money there. There's not as much organization there. And so you just get what you get.
Interesting, man. And for someone like yourself, I mean, you were mentioning crazy teams and traveling a lot. It's probably not being the son of a coach. Maybe you had experience traveling because you had mentioned like if when your dad had lost his job, you'd go back to Idaho for a period of time and so forth. At the beginning of the interview, you mentioned that, but did that take a toll on you and your girlfriend and your spouse, having to go from place to place? Even that once you were talking about the Stampede, Cavs, the 10-day with the Warriors, the Nuggets, all that, and then you're overseas, all that stuff. Does that take a toll on you having to move from place to place? Like, I mean, you're packing your bags, you're going here. I hate moving. That's why I'm asking that question. Like, I absolutely hate moving. So I want to know what your thoughts are there. Is that hard?
Yeah, I mean, it can be, but for the most part, it was enjoyable. So like I would go back to, like you said, my father being a coach. I was accustomed to moving. Like transition was our life. Like I was just talking to my sister the other day. We moved like some ridiculous amount of times before I was like 13 years old, and we ended up in Seattle, and we were there for 7 years. But before that, I was born in Montana. We went to Cleveland, came to Idaho. My dad coached in Golden State. We went to Albany, New York. We went to Madrid, Spain, back to Albany, back to Madrid. So like we had been everywhere, and in between seasons, we'd come back to Idaho. So I was very accustomed to it. The toll that's taken for the listeners who have kids is I didn't get to plant roots anywhere. So I didn't have like a friend that I knew other than like my cousins that I knew consistently every season. So that was really difficult because I was always the new kid. And that definitely left a scar on me even to this day. It's just I'm not necessarily comfortable with that long-term relationship. I'm getting better at it as I get older because I'm seeing these faces reappear in my life more and more. But growing up, I just didn't have like that same group of friends that you have every year. But as I became an adult, I loved it. The adventure of changing cities, getting to know a new culture. I got to learn Italian and Spanish, the languages, and learn how to communicate in different languages, culinary things, Italian foods and wines. And so I think it reminds me a lot of training, right? It's difficult at first until you see the rewards of it. Whatever you're bench pressing those 40-pound dumbbells, and then you're struggling, and then a month later, those 40s are easy, and it's more fun. Man, what can I try now? What can I get up to the 50, the 55s? And so that's kind of what it reminds me of is, once you rip the Band-Aid off and kind of get through some of those mental fears or friction in your head, it really becomes enjoyable. And those, I'll be so forever thankful for those life experiences.
So awesome, man. It's so cool to hear that. Like, and the way that you just, you embraced it and you learned and all those cool things. And I think that's huge. It helps you develop as a human being, not just as an athlete, but yet, like, you're learning different languages, you're learning different cultures. That's huge for life. Coby, as you get into the G League as a coach, I mean, you've had some experience, but currently with the South Bay Lakers, coaching in the G League, you had mentioned earlier it's a transition for some of these elite college players to get into the NBA and so forth. The G League, which used to be known as the D League, like there have been some massive changes for the better, in my opinion. Prior to the pandemic, obviously everybody was affected by the pandemic situation, but I mean, I still think it's in a good spot because of the affiliation with the NBA. I feel like it's better suited to keep the players here rather than putting them overseas. I would like to get your opinion on that, because I want to know what was different from early on in your playing career professionally compared to now in the G League, which was the D League at the time. Like, what's the differences? Do you feel like it's improved in that regard for, now we're keeping these elite guys here. They get paid a little bit better than they did back then, for the most part. And I feel like they have more opportunities with the G League, the way it's structured now, to get into the NBA.
Yeah. I mean, I'll answer that with a long-winded answer of, when I got into the G League, or that time it was the D League, um, they had A contracts, B contracts, and C contracts. So the A contract was 24,000 for whatever 6 months, which is 4,000 a month. It's pretty good pay. And then the B was 18,000, and then the C was 12,000. So like, we had guys making very limited amounts of money. You get housing, you get very limited amounts of per diem. When I was with the Stampede, we were practicing in the Boys and Girls Club down off Park Center. In the winter, the heat wouldn't be on at 7 a.m. So, like, we'd be wearing sweatshirts and hoodies, and,
Wow.
our locker room was, I'm not even kidding. This is not an exaggeration. It was like a janitor's like closet, and they like basically transformed it for us. And so, just terms of facilities, like you said, being connected to the NBA team, it's drastically different. Now the salaries are, everyone gets 35,000 a month, which is a really good salary for 5 or 6 months that you're in the G League. And most guys, there's a NBA rule. It's called the Exhibit 10, where you can sign for a training camp invite, and you can get anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000 on top of that 35,000. So salary is much different. For us in LA, we have extraordinary complex to train. We're part of the Lakers organization, and we're in the same building as them too. So we share a weight room with them. We share a practice facility. We have our own locker room and lounge and training room and wet room with cold tubs, hot tubs, all that. So like, just looking at it from that standpoint, drastically different. Much more opportunity for guys to take advantage of things. Granted, they have to take advantage of it, and they have to learn some of these pro habits. But I was talking to someone yesterday about, youth sports and the G League as well. And we were talking about, it's just, when it was, when the Idaho Stampede were in Idaho, they're a business. So they're trying to win games. They're trying to promote players. They're trying, and sometimes those don't necessarily align with the development of players. When you send a guy from the Portland Trailblazers here, and we got a good rhythm going, and whoever it is, Roberto Bergeson's playing really well, and they send Patty Mills down, and Patty really isn't ready for the pro game yet, but he's got to play 25 minutes a game. It kind of corrupts the integrity of the game. It corrupts the integrity of team. And but if when you have that as your primary objective is development, which it is now for almost all organizations, there's an understanding going into this is, hey, listen, our Lakers guys are going to get playing time. When they come down to us, they're going to play, and most likely going to start and be a big piece of what we're doing. So that's the understanding. This is what you signed up for. Whereas back then in the D League, I know Bill Eilert, who was part of that ownership group with the Stampede, and I know they had many fights with the Utah Jazz and the Denver Nuggets and the Portland Trailblazers, because whoever it was, that rookie didn't want to be in Idaho and didn't want to play in the D League and was being an asshole, and was talking back to the coach, and it just creates a lot of conflict, right? But now with the one-to-one relationship for each team, it definitely makes it much simpler. and then the vision can be aligned.
Guys, I know there's a lot of you out there who listen to my podcast and you've told me I want to start my own podcast, or I need to build a website or write some blogs or design a social media post. You know what? Go over to Sportsypreneur. The team at Sportsy can make that happen for you. Remember, Sportsypreneur is the content platform where sports and entrepreneurship collide. So make sure to go to sportsy.io. They'll take care of you, or connect with their founder at Eric_Kaz on Twitter. That's ERIC_KAZ. That's interesting to hear. Yeah, for sure. I think that's the 1-to-1 alignment, like for the most part across the league, is huge. I love that you guys have the facility. I mean, LA is like blessed to have that. Like I mean, there's a lot of revenue generated through the Lakers system. I think I just read yesterday, 200 million just off TV revenue alone. So anyways, there's a lot of revenue in a big market, but and just having that accessibility to, and you're around the other players, you're around that other organization. So the coaches and the players learn from that as well. And I am curious, do you guys run the same sets as, like, now that you have these affiliations with each team specifically, and we're trying to get it, do you guys run similar sets so that, like, the transition, if said player gets called up, can just easily transition into the other team? Or how does that work? Do you guys have to kind of work together with the Lakers coaching staff?
Yeah. Yes and no. So,
okay.
So I was hired when Luke Walton was the head coach, and now Frank had kind of a different vision. Luke was like, "Hey, listen, I'm learning how to be a head coach. You do your thing. I'm going to do my thing. Whatever you can align with us, that would be great, because it would really help us out. But, just figure it out. Do whatever you want to do. Feel it out." And then Frank was said, "Hey, I want you to do exactly what we're doing." Where the understanding comes in from Frank's part is, we're in training camp. Our whole staff is in training camp. Our coaching staff is in training camp with him, and about 4 or 5 of our players are in training camp with the Lakers. So we get to learn that system, the general system, defensive execution, offensive execution, some of the sets, plays, concepts. Where what happens, where it's really difficult, and we haven't mastered, which, mastery is a daily thing, but where we can get better, and some teams are better than others, is throughout a season, the Lakers will add a set, and I'm not in shoot around, so I don't know that set. I don't know the execution. I don't know the teaching of it, so you kind of get mixed in right there with that. And then the other thing that we talk a lot about is, we don't have Anthony Davis and LeBron James. So for us, it doesn't make sense to post up our 3-man, because he doesn't have an advantage in the post. For us, it doesn't necessarily make sense to play in a drop coverage on the pick and roll, because Anthony Davis isn't, or Dwight Howard, or JaVale McGee, or now Andre Drummond isn't back there to block that. We have a undersized big, so like, scheme wise, we try to mimic and replicate a lot of what the other team is doing. So it makes it easier for our guys when they go up, that they can have success. But with the understanding that our point guard is not the same point guard. Our point guard might be a scoring point guard, while the Lakers have Rondo, who's more of a facilitator. So you can't necessarily just put a square peg into a round hole.
that's the best analogy and the best comparison. Like, that's the best explanation you could have there. Totally understand. As we wrap up the interview, Coby, it's been amazing talking to you. So I appreciate you joining us. I just want to know, from your experience being around the game, being around sports your entire life, specifically basketball, what would be the number one thing you'd say that sports has taught you for life? What's the number one thing that sports has taught you for life?
The thing that comes to mind is we're all on the same team. I think being, I'll go a little deeper with the wisdom. The divisiveness that our country's kind of been through over this last year, what we're going to experience as we come out of this pandemic, reconnecting with people, reconnecting with our societies and our communities, is just, as an athlete, you learn very early that we're on the same team. We can compete as much as we want, but we're all in this for the same thing. And I think that's the number one thing that I've learned is to be a better teammate. To, Pete Carroll talks about this. He got it from Bill Russell. Was, when you wake up, when you start practice, our mindset should be, how can I help my teammates be better today? how can I make them a better team or a better player today? And I think that's what, being part of a team allows you. You can put all the work in and all the grind, but unless, like we talked about earlier, unless you can fit into that team, then it really doesn't help anything. It happens in a void. So I think that's the biggest lesson for me is just really trying to connect with other people and understand that we're all trying our best and we're all trying to figure it out, and we all want to be part of something bigger than ourselves, and we all want to grow, and we're seeking these things outside of ourselves. Just maintaining that understanding that other people can help, and together we can do things better. So I think that's the one thing that came to mind when you asked the question.
I love it, man. Absolutely love it. Where can we find you, Coby, and where can we hear your podcast and all the information, man? You said you got it onto social media just recently. So if you want people to follow you, shout it out here and we'll put it in the description. If you don't, that's totally understandable too. But hey, if you want them there and if you want them to follow your podcast, let them know, because I want to share that if you have the time.
Yeah, no, the podcast is called The Curious Leader with Coby Karl, and you can get it on, iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And then I'm on Twitter, Coby Karl, I think it's 1. And then I'm on Instagram at Coby Karl 5. You should be able to find me. There might be a couple fakes out there, but
we'll link them in the description so you can find it.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, but I mean that's the cool, that's the cool thing about social media is the ability to connect. This opportunity presents itself because of it. So I appreciate your time, and it's been fun to talk basketball.
Absolutely, brother. I appreciate you. For all the listeners out there, I'll put the links here again for Coby's podcast, as well as his Instagram and Twitter handles here for you guys. Make sure to go follow him. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Appreciate Coby's time. And you guys know the drill. Make sure you guys tune in, subscribe to the podcast, leave me a review if you can. And we'll be coming to you next week with another interview. Take care.
Appreciate it.
Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of my show. Now, if you could go and do me a favor, head over to iTunes, give me 5 stars, and leave me a review. It would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your support.